Hey, I'm Nick, and today I want to talk about habits and more specifically, how consistent habits impact you in the long run. You see, we all have good habits and bad habits, but in order to be productive or do whatever we want to do, it's more important that we're limiting the bad habits instead of constantly trying to create more good habits. But there will most likely get a point where good and bad start to blend into each other. So if you're going to make something a habit, you have to realize if it's good or bad in the long term, as almost any habit can seem good in the moment or even bad at the moment, but are still very important that you stay consistent with. You see, what I used to do is read a lot, and you may think to yourself in the moment that, damn, I'm reading so much, I'm being really productive, but in the long run, you realize that spending 1 or 2 or even more hours a day just reading is going to add up that by the end of your month, you've spent around 60 hours reading a book, which doesn't even consider the time that should be spent actually implementing what the book was about. And most good habits seem insignificant in the moment, as especially when you're tired and you don't quite have that motivation to, as when you're tired and you don't quite have that motivation to chip away at a certain task or get more progress on a certain thing that you're trying to do, it's very easy to rationalize that you don't need to do it for today. And so the best way to think about these habits to figure out whether they are good or bad is to be in the mindset that you're going to do these tasks, these habits, whatever it is, at least 1,000 times. Now I've made it 1,000 as most habits will be done every day, and so doing something every day for a few years will add up to 1,000 times. Now, if you look back at the habit you're trying to analyze and you think of yourself, what is doing this action 1,000 times going to do? And it turns out that reading a book for an hour and spending 1,000 hours reading a book over the span of a few years may make you realize that you don't actually want to be spending that much of your life reading, and you actually want to do things and be active. And in a similar way, the good habits that are small and minor in the moment, if you do those 1,000 times, then you'll definitely be making huge progress in the long run. So that's a very quick and easy step to do. And like I mentioned at the start, what we want to do is not so much as use this for the good habits that we want to build up, but use it to figure out the bad habits so that we can stop those bad habits. Now, there's quite a few ways to do this, but the hardest step is, of course, realizing that we need to get rid of it. And in fact, building a habit tracker to not do that thing not only helps you stay motivated each time you see that tracker, but also helps you stay consistent and keep a streak going of the days that you completed your habit for the day of not doing that habit. And I just want to quickly touch on the power of visualization and how it's good to use it for the habits that you want to actively get into that you know are good for you, and how it's beneficial to actually think of yourself and imagine yourself doing that certain task. Actually, imagining yourself not doing that task is just as effective, and you can do this by thinking of a time where you were very tempted to, let's say, pick up your phone midway through doing some kind of work or anything that distracts you. Think of that and imagine yourself doing that, and imagine what your next action to that will be, and will hopefully be to put your phone away or snap out of the days that you just put yourself in and get back onto your task. Now, I also just quickly mentioned consistency, but I've not quite touched into exactly how powerful consistency is. Unless you, of course, think of your habits as something that's going to be done 1,000 times. That is when you really start realizing that consistency really does matter. In fact, you should almost always prioritize consistency over actual quantity. And instead of thinking of things as being done in large chunks of times in 2 hour, 4 hour blocks, think of them closer to a weekly basis of the total amount of time that you want to be spending on it per week, as that will help you be consistent and is much easier to visualize instead of abstractly thinking how doing a habit 1,000 times will impact you. But yeah, that's it for today, and I hope that way of thinking about habits has really helped you sort out whether you should keep a habit or start a new one that will actually really help you. And if you do need to break the bad habits, then you use the same methods that you would to actually start a habit, but just make that new habit the habit of not doing the old bad habit, if that makes sense. That's it for today, and if you still want to learn about anything to do with productivity hacks or tips, I've now started one-on-one coaching where you can book a call with the first link in the description. But until then, I'll see you later.